Welcome back to Crime Besties to episode 30 of Two Crime Besties.
Did you forget the name, did you?
Look, I was like, welcome back to Crime Besties. And then I'm like, to another episode of Two Crime Besties. You think I'd be a little more all over it by now, but I'm not. So anyway, welcome to episode 30. I always feel like when we reach a decade milestone, we're doing really well. So
Totally.
Again, cheers to us.
Yes.
Yay.
Well, I read somewhere recently that like most podcasts don't make it past episode 3.
Oh.
And those that make it to 20 are like here to stay.
Oh, well, we're here to
stay.
I think we've already decided that.
Yeah.
And thanks to everybody for your amazing feedback. So this is actually, we're recording this very, very early January 2025. Our first recording session of 2025, actually. And I think this will be episode 3, won't it?
Yeah,
of the
episode
year.
3 of back of the year, yeah.
But we were just commenting that we have had so much lovely feedback over the holidays. So we can see that a lot of you have gone back and been listening to old episodes or maybe catching up on episodes that you've missed.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate that.
But I love there's a few extra comments coming through like on Spotify or on socials and that too around some older episodes, which is so good. It's nice to sort of go back and refresh on those and have a banter about that.
Yeah, it's great. In particular, I'd like to shout out Nudes.
Nudes.
Nudes has commented a couple of times and they were both lovely, lovely comments. So thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who comments and shares and likes. We see them all. Mm-hmm. We can't necessarily always reply to everything, but we try our very, very best.
I'm finding that it's getting harder now because there's more. Like it's a good problem to have. That is for damn sure.
That's it. On Christmas Day, one of my cousins, Nick, he came up to me and he's like, I actually did not even know you had a podcast, because he doesn't have any social media or anything like that. And he's a school teacher, so he's on holidays at the moment. And he's like, yes. I absolutely love true crime podcasts. I've already subscribed and I'm going to give it a listen. So Nick, if you're listening, thanks.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
We've had that a bit over the summer holidays with a few catch-ups with various people. I was at a family-ish sort of gathering and someone sidled up to me that was a friend of my brother's and stuff, and they're like, I'm listening to your podcast. And I'm like, oh, okay, hi. Yeah, so it's kind of people I don't know necessarily,
nice.
But, family and friends who have been telling, friends who have, said, I'm into true crime podcasts and have passed it on to other people. And, so it's kind of nice to have people come up and kind of go, I've been listening, and that's really good, really positive feedback. So loving that.
Love it. Thank you. How are your summer holidays going so far? Did you have
good.
a nice Christmas? I know for everyone listening, this will be a little bit delayed, but the Christmas New Year period was good.
Yeah, no, really good. We had a really lovely New Year's. Just myself and the boys, we went to a nice hotel and really nice fireworks display that we got to watch out the window, and it was just really nice quality time with the kids. So really good, and I enjoyed that. And Christmas has been amazing with lots of food and lots of catching up with people. We've had visitors from overseas, that we haven't seen in like 13 years, which was just it was really lovely that we just sort of like kicked off as if there hasn't been that kind of space in between. So, and we've all got kids now that we're all similar ages, that we're all just like, they just got along so well so quickly. And although, God, it's embarrassing, my youngest, who is the social butterfly, I said to them in the car on the way home that night, I'm like, I loved how, you guys just embraced them, you were like really friendly really quickly. And Brady goes, well, it's because I've worked it out, Mum. How you make friends is you just make them laugh, which is really nerve-wracking. So I'm like, oh God. So he said to me,
hashtag class clown.
Oh,
here he comes.
Yeah.
Oh, he is funny. He's very funny.
So he decided that immediately, because his little niece, my little niece, his cousin, had these tattoos that she was like, oh, let's put these, little tattoo things on. And so he was like, oh, well, I'll break the ice, I'll be the funny kid. And he put one on his face and he goes, they laughed, Mum. And so then we were just friends.
Oh, that's gorgeous. I love that. Kids are it's so easy. Do you
easy.
remember being a kid and being like that? Like you'd meet somebody and you'd be besties in no time.
Yeah, yeah.
As an adult, it's so much harder to make
There's so
friends.
many more complications to things than that.
And you also know what you like and don't like when you're an adult.
This is it. Yeah. No fucks to give.
Yeah. It's like, no, you're not my people. So.
Yep, definitely. No, so that was really gorgeous. Yeah. How about you?
We had a lovely Christmas at another one of my cousin's houses, and we hosted a big Christmas Eve do here at our place, which I just love doing. It is my favourite event of the year.
Can I just say the food was amazing?
The meat in particular.
Yeah,
Peter was very proud. Yeah, Peter was very
really
proud of the meat.
Yeah,
he did like this. I don't know if anyone cares, but he did this full packer brisket, whatever that means. It was 9 kilos.
I am not a
of
meat eater, like by any means. I legit could, as long as I can have bacon, I would be vegetarian. But I literally bit into that and was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it was really good. It was probably the best one he's ever done.
Yeah.
Oh,
right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really good.
Well, I feel special.
Yeah. So we did that. And then a couple of days after Christmas, Peter had said, hey, how about we go camping for a couple of nights in that dull week where we normally do nothing? And at the
that
time...
week where I call it airport rules.
Yeah, airport rules. Total airport rules.
Anything goes.
And it literally, you'll spend $100 to... I saw a meme. It was like, spend $100 to get a coffee delivered? Sure. Money means nothing in the airport.
Yeah. Cereal at 10 p.m. and a wine at 10 a.m. Why not?
Absolutely. So... we packed up and went camping for 2 nights, not far from where we live, about an hour and a half away.
And you're such the camping type.
Oh, I fucking hate it. I hate camping. The boys love it. So I'm like, no, I'm going to grin and bear it. So we found this place called, this website, my husband found it, called Hip Camp. And it's people who they list their own properties on there.
Right.
And you can just...
So like Airbnb for campers.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, right.
And so you don't have to camp with riffraff. You're guaranteed a spot, all that sort of stuff.
Did you bring your kids?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and the dog, actually.
Yeah, I love the dog.
And
had a ball.
It was actually great. And it had a flushable toilet at the house that you could access from an outside room sort of thing. So at least there was a flushable toilet.
It's still a fair hike away by the sounds of things.
It was only about 50 metres away. It wasn't far.
Okay, right.
And there was a river there. The kids were, just loving life. The dog loved herself sick there.
That's so gorgeous.
So, look, as far as by the time we got there and set up, the actual camping bit, I was actually semi-okay with.
Wow.
I actually think I might have even enjoyed myself.
What?
Yeah. We were camping in Newgie, for anybody who knows Victoria, and there's a really good pub in Newgie. So the next day we went to Newgie pub and my dad rode his motorbike there and met us for lunch, which was awesome.
Yeah.
I had maybe one too many wines.
No, that's so not you.
You probably wouldn't guess it.
No.
So it was really good. It was really good fun. But then it's bookended by so much work. So it was like a day preparation to pack the car, pack everything we needed. Mm-hmm. And then when we got back, I counted no fewer than 9 loads of washing.
Oh, my God.
Because unfortunately the first night we were there, it rained. It wasn't heavy and we were well protected. We had all the gear that we needed.
Yeah.
But everything got wet and muddy. Oh. And so literally everything we took needed washing.
Yeah.
Thankfully, when we got back, it was really warm, so everything dried really quickly. But it took a good couple of days to wash and dry everything and pack everything away. And then it was time to pack away all the Christmas stuff. So I'm just done.
God. Oh, yeah. No, you need a holiday from your holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at least you got a little bit more time before you go back to
Yeah,
work
I've got
too.
another week now before I go back to work. So happy with that.
But, oh, no. Camping's not my thing.
Nah. It's not mine either. My kids love it.
Ugh,
and Peter's happy to do it with them and without me. So
which is great.
Most of the time I let that happen. A bit of quality time with Dad.
Yes. Yeah, that's good bonding time.
Yeah, I think so.
We'll go with that anyway.
Yeah. Should we get into today's episode?
Oh, let's. I'm ready for this one to exit my brain. I'll have to be really honest. It's hard, this one to have in there. So
I think we should probably maybe state a bit of a warning today.
Definitely.
This episode, so we're talking about Karlie Pierce-Stevenson and Khandalyce Pierce. This episode got me. I was in tears researching this yesterday. There are so many really, truly awful things that happened to these girls. Mm-hmm. And look, we'll try and warn you when we're about to say something that's particularly awful. But if this is something that you don't feel you can listen to at the moment, please skip ahead because
we'll be obviously talking about children as well being murdered. So that's
children being murdered and sexual assaults against women and children. So if that's not something you can listen to, please skip
Yeah,
it.
look after yourself. Yeah,
Yep.
for sure. Because, yeah, it's been a tough one to look into, I've found.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really heavy. Really, really heavy. So Karlie Jade Pierce was born on the 7th of August in 1988 in Alice Springs. Her dad was named Bruce Pierce and her mum was Colleen Stevenson. And they weren't married at the time when Karlie was born. And I think their relationship, I think, was very in its infancy when they kind of got together, and they didn't last very long after Karlie was born. Colleen, who is Karlie's mum, then remarried a man by the name of Scott Povey, who became obviously Karlie's stepdad in 1995. And for all intents and purposes, Scott was Karlie's dad.
Yeah. They had a very good relationship.
They did. He was a truck driver, a long distance truck driver. So he used to commute. He used to drive trucks from Adelaide to Alice Springs and back.
Yeah.
He actually did a lot around Australia, but I think
That was his main route.
Yeah, that was his main route. And sometimes Karlie would go along with him on these long haul journeys, and they'd camp in the outback, and they just had a really lovely bond. And he says to this day that he loves her like his daughter.
Yeah. I know. I read of like the typical kind of stuff, you know, of like teenagers and that sort of thing, you know, having conflicts with parents. But there was certainly nothing that was untoward in terms of their family life. It was very much a typical family of, you know, so a blended family, but one that very much worked.
Yeah. There's a funny story that I heard where apparently Scott was having a bit of a go at Karlie for having a messy room when she was a teenager.
Yeah.
And he'd just had enough. So he's like, I'm going to throw all this shit out in the front lawn because this is just ridiculous.
I've threatened that before.
Yeah. and so he, like, you know, he's throwing all this stuff out and she was at home and she's like trying to bring it all in. And, you know, as this kerfuffle sort of ensued, they both saw the humour in it and just started laughing. And he's like, well, I couldn't be angry at her anymore, could I? You know, like it was just a funny situation.
Yeah.
And she promised it on that day. She's like, I promise I'm going to keep my room really nice for you now. Never happened.
No, well.
No, of course not. Were you a messy teenager?
Not particularly. My mum probably disagrees with me. I don't know.
I was terrible.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I can't imagine you being messy.
I know. Like my house now, I like things neat and tidy.
Yeah.
But no, I was foul. I think gross.
I was on, you know, average. I wouldn't say I was overly messy, but I wasn't like a neat freak either.
Did you have like clothes on the floor and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
then I was probably about on par with that.
Yeah, yeah. I've always said, like, my mum was always surprised by how neat and stuff I kept my workplace. Like, and I'd talk about how organised I'd be at work because that was not how I behaved at home. Like, yeah, so there was definitely a difference.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But your house now is lovely.
Oh, is it? With kids?
It's always I mean, look,
it gives me anxiety when things aren't neat and tidy. And my boys realise that now. And they're starting to learn to put things away. Like, because I just can't handle it because it sets me off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
but
agreed.
That's, you know, that's another therapy session.
We'll do that another day. Sorry, I've just gone on a tangent. We're like 3 seconds into the episode.
God. Here we are.
In 1992, Karlie's brother Luke was born, so he was her half brother, and so his dad is Scott. Even though Colleen and Scott actually married a few years later, he was born out of wedlock. What? But again, I think Karlie and Luke got along really well. I've heard him speak in the media. There's not a lot of videos or necessarily interviews of the family in this case because they're very quiet
about all of this, which I think to their credit in terms of, you know, getting to the truth of things. They came out later with you know, a little bit here and there, but they weren't one of those families who were front and center of all this.
Absolutely not. They were just a very quiet and unassuming family. Yeah. And, you know, salt of the earth type of people.
Yeah. Well, they've lived in Alice Springs all their lives. I mean, you've got to be like, you know, pretty straightforward and easygoing to live out in the outback like that. I think, you know, you're not a city slicker, that's for sure.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Good people. Hard workers, I bet.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they absolutely were. Khandalyce Kiara Pierce was born on the 19th of June in 2006 to Karlie and a boyfriend that she'd had for not very long, but he wasn't all that interested in being a dad. But Karlie decided, she was 18 years of age, I believe, when Karlie was born. When Khandalyce was born, she turned 18.
Yeah.
And
she was really excited to be a mum too. Like, she was really into it.
Like her auntie said that she'd always wanted to be a mum. You know, she was one of those kids.
Yeah. She just fell into it and was, you know, from all the family accounts of Karlie as a mum was all very positive. The only negative comments around her being a mother came from particularly two people that we'll mention later.
That's right. And we'll mention that when it comes.
Yeah.
Because Karlie was so young when she had Khandalyce. Now, I'll just spell Khandalyce for everyone because it's one of those names. When I hear the name, it's not spelt the way I think it's spelt. So Karlie is actually Karlie and Khandalyce is Khandallyce.
Yep.
You know, spelling to me is like a big deal. So anyway, that's the way it is. When Karlie would go out at night, because she's an 18-year-old kid. She's going out with her friends. Friends are the most important thing in your life then.
Absolutely.
She would either leave Khandalyce with her mum or with her grandma, so with Connie. And Connie tells this story about, you know, Karlie would go out at night. She'd come back she'd be inebriated. And the next morning, Connie would wake her up when Khandalyce woke up and was like, no, you're her mum.
Yep.
You need to get up and feed her.
Yep.
You need to take some responsibility. Happy to look after her when you go out. But, you know, motherly duties start the next morning.
Yeah.
Oh, what? Mothering hungover is the worst.
It's the absolute worst. And stupidly, we never learn.
Never. Oh, you might give yourself a week or two reprieve. But
yes. Yeah, it's too much fun. Like you're having so much fun, you forget to what you're going to get up to the next morning, I reckon.
Yeah.
But yes, I think it's lovely that whole family, you know, support system that she had. It was certainly raising Khandalyce in a village.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it wasn't, you know, that she had this child at 18 and it got passed on to her mum and grandma to raise her at all. It was Karlie was her mum. Karlie was the one who did, you know, 80%, I would say, if not 90% of the raising of her with then a support network. Which
they expected her to get a job. So they were happy to look after Khandalyce when Karlie was working. Yeah. They were more than happy to do that. The aunties were the same. So Colleen's sisters were more than happy to help out in that way because they actually had young kids of their own. So they were all kind of being raised together and, you know, it's lovely.
Yeah.
But as you said, Karlie was responsible for Khandalyce and was from everything that I've read, aside from those two people's accounts, was a wonderful, devoted mum.
Yeah.
As an 18-year-old.
Yes. Yeah. Which, I mean,
blows
so
my
good
mind.
on her. Good on her.
Good on her. Yeah. So I'm going to start off on the 29th of August in 2010. There were some trail bike riders riding through the Belanglo State Forest. Now, you might recognise that area in relation to a different case that we will cover at some point, and that's the Ivan Milat case.
Yeah.
He dumped all of his victims in a different part of the Belanglo State Forest in New South Wales.
We'll come back to him another day.
We will absolutely come back to him.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that... Anyway, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Trail bike riders, they'd gone out for a day of riding and they come upon skeletal remains, basically.
Yeah.
And one of them is a vet.
Oh,
and
right.
he stops and he's like, well, these don't look like animal remains. They look like potentially human remains. And everyone's like, nah, there's no way. It must be a dingo. It must be maybe not a dingo. I don't know. It must be something else. Mm-hmm. And they keep going. And then their trail actually led them back around to where they had originally found these remains. And this particular trail bike rider was like, no, this is absolutely something that I think we need to call in.
Wow.
So they contact the police, the nearest police station, which, I can't remember. It might be Glebe Police Station. I might be wrong with that, but anyway, a local police station to the Belanglo State Forest. And they say, look, we think we found human remains. And apparently that happened a lot. And it would 9 times or 99 times out of 100, it would turn out to be animal remains. And so the officer who took the call was like, oh, let me transfer you to my superior. The superior was like, look, can you just send me... There was one person apparently who had mobile phone reception in this whole group.
God.
And he said, look, can you just text me a photo of it because I just need to know whether I need to send officers out immediately or not.
Yeah.
They sent the photo and apparently as soon as this officer saw the photo, he was like, oh, that's 100% a human skull.
Yeah.
So they said, can you go and meet the trail bike riders? Can you go and meet the police at this particular point? They've done that, directed them into the remains, and within, I think, 4 hours, it was swarming with police.
Yeah.
They'd tented the area. They'd brought in the homicide, the cold case. They'd brought in every, specialist unit that they needed. And they brought in a forensic pathologist also. What the forensic pathologist determined on autopsy was that the body was aged between 13 and 25 years, was of a female, and had been sitting in that forest for between 6 months and 10 years.
Yeah.
So a huge time frame, but it was really difficult to say.
But the only thing that ruled out was it being Ivan Milat.
It couldn't have been Ivan Milat.
So he was in jail in 96, I think it was.
It was. Yep, 96, yep.
Yep, so that meant that there was no way that this was an Ivan Milat case.
Yep.
This was something else. So, yeah.
The forensic pathologist and an anthropologist who were at the scene, also they were obviously conducting the postmortem. They determined that these skeletal remains had endured fractures, so to ribs on both sides, and a blunt force trauma to the sternum, also, which would have been lethal to soft organs. So they basically said that the amount of trauma to the rib cage and sternum meant that would have been lethal.
Yeah. Yeah. And they suggested that perhaps by the way of of forcefulness that it was potentially stomping or kneeing of the area. Yeah.
Because it was like a wide, blunt force.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't like a hammer or anything like that. Yeah. So the other things that were found with these remains were a T-shirt. It was a white cotton T-shirt with a pink love heart motif that had the words angelic, typewritten across the heart.
Yeah.
A single white sock and a single silver sleeper earring. The police had nowhere really to go with this.
They had no DNA, I guess, in terms of soft tissue. There was nothing that they could get off of any of that to identify this body.
But they assumed that they'd be able to get DNA from the bone, which they were able to do.
Yes, that's right. Sorry.
They then tried to figure out from their missing persons list, would any people on that list necessarily meet this 13 to 25 years of age and having been missing for between 6 months and 10 years.
Yeah.
And they basically went through everyone on that list, and I think it was 75 odd people matched that in New South Wales, that from a missing person's perspective.
Yeah.
They went through each one of those and determined that none of those people belonged to these remains.
Yeah.
So they were kind of really stuck. They've got a DNA profile, but they've got no match to any DNA that they've got. Where do they go from here? There's nowhere to go.
No.
There's nothing to do. They really tried hard to figure out where the T-shirt had come from.
Yeah, that was really highly publicised at the time on news. We're in Victoria. This occurred in New South Wales. It was definitely all over our news here. It was widespread. That T-shirt. I remember seeing that very clearly. Yeah.
But nothing sort of came of that. Nobody came forward. They named this Jane Doe the Angel of Belanglo Forest because, the word angel was written across her T-shirt.
They did a facial approximation image as well.
Have you seen an interview with the woman who did this?
No, I haven't.
Oh, my God.
Oh, really?
Oh, yep.
So that was in 2011.
She's interesting. But
All right. Okay. Yeah. Well, I know that they she was like some sort of anthropologist.
Yeah, something.
Yeah. I mean, they said that once they did work out what the person actually looked like and compared to what their approximation was, that they learnt a lot from that. But
well, so they say. They did say also they did some kind of, I don't know how they did this, but they thought the remains potentially belonged to a European person.
Right.
So then they were giving all of these details and sending the DNA profile like around the world.
Oh, wow.
Seeing whether there were hits in other countries where people had reported family members missing in Australia.
I mean, the area is highly, trafficked with backpackers and stuff, which, so I guess that's not, unfeasible.
Again, I think that was to the tune of roughly 50 or 60 police departments around the world that they sent this DNA profile to. Again, it was not fruitful. Can you imagine being one of the families of a missing person and saying, hey, we're matching, we're going to compare the DNA of this person to your missing loved one?
You'd get your hopes up every time. That you were going to get a hit and know what happened to your loved one. I mean, we've talked on other episodes about that whole not knowing.
The ambiguous loss.
Ambiguous loss.
Yeah.
I mean, that you would grapple onto anything like that to find out, like, what happened. So it would be horrific constantly being like, we think we might have found them. And I mean, at the same time, you wouldn't want it to be them because you want them to be alive. Like, I can't imagine that pull from either direction of like, this could be them, of like wanting it to be them so but also not wanting it to be them because you want them to be alive. Like, that would be just awful. Yeah.
That'd be absolutely horrific. What the police did find out about the T-shirt was that it was produced between 2003 and 2006, but it was mass-produced in China.
Yeah, do you remember that Chain Reaction store? Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I do. I had quite a number of Chain Reaction pants. I used to wear their pants a lot. And it was actually a girl's size 10. So they're like, this was a very small-framed girl, which is why they thought maybe the person was as young as 13 because it was on a very slight and small person. All right. About 1,000 kilometres away from Belanglo, in Wanaka, South Australia, 1.5 kilometres out of the town, in July 2015. So the original skeletal remains were found in 2010 in Belanglo. In 2015... a group of blokes, or 3 blokes, I think, were on a road trip and driving out of Wanaka in South Australia along the Karoonda Highway, and nature called. They needed to do a wee. So they pulled over to the side of the road, side of the highway, and sort of, I guess, in order to disguise themselves a little bit, went into the brush. And this particular man was, relieving himself. And he sort of glanced over, something caught his eye, glanced over, and he saw a suitcase. And it was partially open. There were bits and pieces sort of around it or coming out of it.
Yeah, just sort of coming out. Yeah.
Did it look like animals had maybe tried to get into it but hadn't necessarily succeeded? And curiosity got the better of him. I need to know this because when I was listening to this, I was like, I wouldn't go near it.
Yeah.
Would you? If you just saw a discarded suitcase on the side of a highway, would you go near it?
Probably not.
I'd just be like,
unfortunately, there's been a few cases where like there's been bodies on the side of the road, and that sort of is in a similar sort of situation. And I now have this whole thing of like, now that I drive past like something that looks a bit sus, I guess, which people dump all sorts of things, not necessarily bodies on the side of the road. I keep going, keep driving, and I often then will go, should I have stopped? And you're like, no, don't be an idiot. Like, it'll just be nothing. But yeah, I don't know.
But it might not be nothing.
Yeah.
Like, you just don't know.
No.
Anyway, this guy,
I reckon a number of people had literally done that though.
For sure. Because if I had have been taking one of my kids for a wee down there, I would have been like, don't touch that. It's probably gross. No, don't.
Because it could have been like to me on a highway like that, it could have literally been someone's got a suitcase on the roof of their car, it's come flying off,
That's what I would have assumed.
You just kind of go, just leave it alone.
I wouldn't have touched it. Anyway, this guy, thankfully, curiosity got the better of him. He's opened up the suitcase and he's seen what he thinks is a small human skull.
Yeah.
Now, again, not sure of what he's seeing, although there are children's items in the suitcase, which kind of really throws him in that. When I say throws him, it really gets him into a bit of a tiz because he's like, holy shit, like what the fuck? So he ends up obviously calling the police. The police come immediately. They were there very, very swiftly.
Yeah.
And again, within an hour or so, the whole place was tented and the police forensics were there and they were sort of like combing through, seeing what was there, taking photographs, doing all of the things that they needed to do.
Yeah.
What they found were about 30 items in that suitcase, including a black tutu with colourful polka dots, satin Holden boxer shorts, so Holden being
Like
a
the
car
car.
brand, a purple T-shirt which had a Dora the Explorer motif on it, pink suede coat, among other things. So the police were like, well, let's have a look in, again, skeletal remains of a very young person. I think it was pretty evident that this child was of roughly 2 years of age.
They reckon
and
that
was
between
female.
1.2 and 4.8 years of age.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a slightly wider,
Yeah.
a slightly narrower time frame, but I mean, it was tiny little
Little
skeletal
bean.
bones.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So she was found, they found 2 balls of cotton, of that dishcloth kind of stuff, like in the mouth, 2 balls of that within the mouth of the skull. They found that there was a disposable nappy had been applied around the side of and the front of the skull, and that towels were wrapped around the torso of the body.
There was also gaffer tape wrapped all the way around the head, so near the mouth. So by this stage, obviously, all of the flesh was gone.
There was, no soft tissue whatsoever left.
No.
Yeah.
But they could still see the gaffer tape was around the victim's mouth.
Yeah.
And the victim was in sort of kind of curled up in a fetal position in the suitcase at the time.
They don't, from what from the autopsy they could see, what kind of they could do in terms of autopsy, was that there was no damage to the skull or to the bones of the body. So therefore they weren't able to determine what the cause of death was, because there was no flesh left, no soft tissue, and because there was no damage to the body, they were assuming that potentially it was suffocation due to the fact of the gaffer tape and things being on the mouth and things being in the mouth, and that there was no breaks of bones, etc., or skull fractures. So it was a fair assumption that suffocation would have been the cause of death.
Yep.
Yeah.
Again, they've tried to look for missing persons records, because who wouldn't be missing a 2-year-old or between 1.5 and 4-year-old child?
Yeah.
They thought the tutu might be a good lead, so they looked into that, but it turned out it was sold at a Cotton On store, so there were
Everywhere.
literally thousands of them. The one thing that they did have in the suitcase, which really helped later on, not at the time exactly, but there was a hand-stitched quilt in there. It had octagonal panels. It was around 90 centimetres by 90 centimetres. Each panel had like animal motifs or animal prints on it. And then there was a very distinctive border made of musical notes. Like the fabric was made of, like, had musical notes all over it. It was the only unique item that was really found. Even the suitcase was one that you could buy a dime a dozen at Kmart. So
There
it's
was
not,
also a dress that was in there too, a pink dress that was it wasn't distinctive at all in terms of, it was sold very highly, but there was a pink dress that was recognisable potentially. Yeah.
But that sort of was fruitful and wasn't fruitful anyway. They weren't able to follow any of this up really at the time.
Not at the time. No.
So again, we've got a deceased woman in Belanglo State Forest who we don't know the whereabouts of, and we've got around approximately a 2-year-old in South Australia who, again, we don't know who she belongs to, and how could a 2-year-old or roughly 2-year-old not be reported missing? It's bizarre.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But so in October 2015, they were able to put together through basically Crime Stoppers, there was a phone call, and it was actually the 1,271st phone call they had come through about this little baby, this little young person that was in the suitcase, who was able to, they recognised the pink dress in the suitcase, and that they hadn't seen this child in a while. And so she was actually able to pull out a photo of her wearing that exact dress, and also then a photo of her in a stroller with the blanket. And she named the child as Khandalyce Karlie Pierce.
So the person who reported this, her name was Tanya Weber. Tanya Weber was Karlie's mum, Colleen's best friend. There were 2 decades of difference in age for these women, but they met working together at I think it was at a clothes shop actually.
Right.
And they became really, really good friends. So Tanya was basically halfway between Colleen's age and was actually closer to Karlie's age. But because she and Colleen were such good friends, they spent so much time together. They'd go camping together, and Tanya was saying that, like, you know, she'd spent so much time with Khandalyce and so much time with Karlie just through being friends with Karlie's mum. And so she had an intimate knowledge of these two, well, this girl and this woman. And yeah, she recognized, and, you know, to her it was bizarre because at that point in 2015, they hadn't heard from Karlie and Khandalyce in a very long time. And any contact that, you know, they had, which we will get into a little bit later, was only ever by phone. They'd never seen them. Interesting.
Yep.
So that was on the 6th of October that Tanya originally rang Crime Stoppers. Now, as you said, it was in amongst, I think, over 3,000 phone calls that they received.
Yep.
On the 8th of October, she was getting impatient. She was like, this is ridiculous. No one's called me back. I've got information and I know I need to get this to the police. So she rang Crime Stoppers again. She said she has 3 photos in particular that they must see.
Yep.
And that night, a detective did phone her back, gave her his email address and said, can you please email them through? She did that night, went to bed.
Yeah.
The next morning, he basically emailed her back and said, can you answer all these questions for me? And it was things like, when was the last time you saw them? What do you know about them? What was their last known address?
Yeah.
As much information as she could possibly give. And she even says there wasn't a lot that she could really give, but she was able to say she was with this person. This is the last address that we have for her. You know, give them something to go on, I guess.
Absolutely.
When the police saw the photos, they say now, in hindsight, that was an absolute turning point in the investigation for them because they didn't really have any viable leads at this point.
No.
So you've got to keep in mind that at this point they're only looking, this is the South Australian Police, and they're only looking into the death of what we now think may be Khandalyce.
Yeah. Because
they had this information from Tanya, the South Australian Police contacted Alice Springs Hospital and asked for the DNA, or asked for the Guthrie card that was taken. So this is the heel prick test that is taken on every baby born in Australia in a hospital. And they were able to then positively match the DNA from the Guthrie card that was taken when Khandalyce was born in Alice Springs with the DNA of the bones that were found in the suitcase on the highway. The other thing that the police looked into at this point, so now they know the identity of this child, they were then looking into, okay, let's try and figure out some more information. The child was immunised at 18 months and there were no further records of this child anywhere.
No.
There was no Medicare record. She was never enrolled at a school. She would have been 9 years old at the point where this was all found.
Yeah.
She'd never been enrolled in a school. She'd never attended a hospital or a doctor or anything
because at this
that.
point they don't know when that suitcase was put on that side of the road. So even though they're guessing, you know, we've got a guess here between 1.2 and 4.8 years, they don't know how old she was, even like when she was put in that suitcase.
Yeah.
So
or how long ago it was.
Yeah, how long ago it was.
They can estimate how long. I actually didn't see an estimate of how long they thought she'd been there. Did you find that information?
I didn't
either.
No, but it was through DNA that they were able to then link Khandalyce to Karlie. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
So this is amazing police work, by the way. So the police are sort of then looking, okay, the fact that we don't have a missing persons report for this child, then so they're thinking, okay, well, where's the mother? Obviously, Tanya's given them the information about Karlie and said, this is Karlie, this is the last known address. They've gone to that address. Karlie's not there. These people legitimately didn't know where Karlie was, what was going on with Karlie at the time. So they're like, okay, well then where's Karlie? So then they decided, this was over the course of I think about 7 months, was it? They've looked at missing persons reports for young women all around the country. And they have basically sent the DNA off, here, there and everywhere to try and figure out whether there was a match between any of the current missing persons and Khandalyce. And eventually.
Oh, it was pretty quick. It was October 21st that the police stood in front of media and announced it.
Oh, so it was only a few months.
Yeah. Oh, not even. So she reported it in mid-October, and it was by the end of October they'd had the results.
Oh, wow, that is really quick.
Yeah.
I thought it was way later than that. Okay.
No.
Oh, that's amazing then. So anyway, they've obviously figured out that these two are related, and a mother and daughter. They've got a genetic match to show that.
But at the same time, it's New South Wales and Adelaide. Like they're 100 kilometres.
1,000 kilometres.
From each other.
Yeah.
It's how on earth is mother and daughter so far away? How'd they end up in this predicament where they clearly have been in some sort of horrific situation?
That's it. So let's go back now to 2007. In late 2007, Karlie was in a relationship with a man named Robbie. From everything I've heard, he was actually a really lovely bloke.
Yeah.
Took Khandalyce on as his own and, worked really hard to try and give them a life that he wanted to give them.
They moved in together or moved into his family's home, I think, and
I think they moved in with his family, and then that was getting a little bit tough, which it absolutely would be. So one of Robbie's friends, I don't even know how this came about, but through a friend of Robbie's, they ended up becoming caretakers at a speedway near wherever they were, like in Alice Springs somewhere.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the speedway off the top of my head, but what they basically did was if they were going to caretake the grounds, they could rent there for less than $100 a week. So they were like, yep, happy to do it, mow a lawn here, put a lick of paint on the house and it'll be great. And I think they had a really nice 6 odd months in this house and they were really getting along well. Karlie's family say that Robbie was a genuinely lovely man, and he really loved Karlie and really, really loved Khandalyce.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Robbie met a man by the name of Daniel Marshall at the time.
At the time, yep.
So an alias it was, but Robbie didn't know that. This Daniel Marshall worked at a warehouse near Robbie's work, and he rocked up one day and he's like, hey, mate, I'm new to town. Do you know where I can score some drugs? Or do you know anyone who wants any drugs? Because I actually run a bit of a racket between Adelaide and Alice, and, I'm trying to distribute a bit more, and, I'm also looking for a hookup for some dope.
Yeah.
And they kind of became friends. So
they had a child that's similar age to Khandalyce.
Yeah, that's right, Lauren, wasn't it? So they kind of became friends in a sense. And I think at the time, Robbie and Karlie would smoke a joint every now and then, but they weren't massive drug users by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
Daniel's partner, Hazel, they had 3 children. Now, paternity of these children?
Yeah, so Hazel had 3 children from a previous relationship.
But
all 3 of them were definitely someone else's.
Definitely. So,
yeah.
Daniel claimed that the youngest was his, but she wasn't.
No.
Their names were Willow, Ryan, and Lauren. And Daniel and Hazel. So, description of Hazel at this point. Karlie was a very attractive, slim, beautiful, tiny.
Yeah.
Tiny, young thing. I've heard Hazel described in a bit of an opposite way.
Yeah. I mean, we'll put some photos up
frumpy,
on social media, but she wasn't the most
not really all that attractive
woman. Not, I don't know, rough around the edges, maybe we'll put it nicely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But at this point, I mean, you know, she's got a child similar age to Karlie that, you know, they play together.
Fast friends, didn't they?
They did.
Like,
but there was a big age gap. I mean, we're talking Karlie here is like 19. Coming up for 20.
Yeah.
Daniel was 34, and I believe Hazel similar in age.
Yes.
So, I mean, you wouldn't have thought a lot in common to become friends, and so the drugs became, I think, more of
and unfortunately, Daniel in particular introduced Karlie to much harder drugs. So he introduced her to ecstasy and speed and ice.
Yeah.
So methamphetamine. And it led to a definite change in Karlie. Her family all say it. She lost weight where she had none to lose, from what I can gather.
Yeah.
She looked just really unwell. She wasn't eating. She was just not herself. She didn't have that spark that she normally had. That'd be a really hard thing to watch as a parent, wouldn't it? Or as a family member.
Absolutely. Oh, awful.
Awful.
But come to September 15 of 2008, and Daniel is doing one of his regular trips down to Adelaide and back, where they do their drug run. And Hazel Passmore, his girlfriend, along with the three children, have all joined him on this run this particular time. And on the way back from Adelaide, but heading towards Alice Springs, they're on the Sturt Highway, and they hit the Aboriginal community of I'm going to murder it, Indulkana. I believe that's right.
I think that's right.
Where Holdom starts to sort of start falling asleep.
So can I just say, Holdom is actually Daniel Marshall. So his real name is actually Daniel James Holdom.
Sorry, yes. Yeah. So he was telling everyone his name was Daniel Marshall, but he's actually Daniel James Holdom. So Holdom starts falling asleep in the car, and Hazel apparently is trying to wake him up and, you know, keep him going. But this does not apparently work, because all of a sudden the car flips 3 times and completely... Oh, it's horrific. The car accident must have been horrendous. From the car is thrown Hazel, as well as her 3 children.
Oh, not the youngest.
Not the youngest. The
youngest, who is it? Oh my God. Sorry, that's my dog trying to play. The youngest Lauren was in a car seat.
Yes.
And she was not thrown from the car, but Willow and Ryan were thrown from the car.
Yep.
I believe it was about 10 to 12 metres from the car.
Yep.
And when Daniel came to and was trying to assess the situation, he found them lying both face down in the dirt, 10 odd metres from the car.
Yep.
And they were clearly deceased.
Yeah. So a truck driver was the first to come onto the scene and find them, to which he found Daniel wandering around the scene. So he was physically able and not injured in that much of an extensive way at all. Whereas Hazel was clearly, he saw her laying on the ground with her baby, with the youngest, next to her. And then apparently Daniel has said to the truck driver, the other 2 kids are dead and they're over there, and points to the bush, to which then the truck driver goes to assess them immediately before calling for O.
Now, I think help was about an hour away, and the help, unfortunately, was nurses from the local district hospital.
I don't think they would have been able to help anyway, really, in terms of kids, I think they were
not
already...
with the kids.
They
were
killed on impact, unfortunately.
Absolutely. But Hazel had sustained some absolutely horrific injuries.
Yeah, so she ended up having a leg amputated and was wheelchair bound from that point on.
Yeah, so both of her knees were dislocated. There was a compound fracture to the left knee. Both of her arms were degloved.
Oh.
She was airlifted eventually to Alice Springs Hospital, but then they needed to move her to the Royal Adelaide Hospital because they couldn't deal with her that much trauma at the Alice Springs Hospital.
No.
She was in an induced coma for 2 weeks, and as you said, they had to amputate her left leg above the knee. She had to undergo skin grafts for her arms, and she ended up needing a bowel resection as well due to the soft tissue damage that she'd sustained in the accident.
You
and
gotta
she was
wonder
confined to a wheelchair for life.
Yeah, you got to wonder how he walked away.
Well, he had a broken collarbone and a broken thumb. The other thing they found in the car was $10,000 in cash.
He also had...
What else was he on?
Well,
honestly.
So they also did do, obviously, drug tests and things, and they did find drugs in his system, which he said that yes, he had taken drugs, a few days ago, but he wasn't under the influence of them at that point of driving. I don't know. Really... To me, honestly, I reckon that's the only way he walked away. To me, he would have had that, limp kind of, that's I think that's unfortunately what protected him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, God, I can't. The two youngest kids, just awful.
Yeah. I think the youngest, Lauren, so she was the one in the car seat.
Yeah.
She actually sustained very minimal injuries herself. She had a laceration to her head, and that was about it.
Thank God. Yeah. But yeah, the other two, they put off obviously funerals for the two other children until Hazel was able to exit the hospital.
Yep.
So that was put off by a couple of months. But I think it was August, they had the funeral for the two children.
Yeah.
During the time whilst Hazel was in hospital, Daniel would rock up to visit her with Karlie and Khandalyce. And even at this point, Hazel was, something's going on here.
So I think Daniel had contacted Robbie in the middle of the night and said, fuck, man, this is shit. Like, things are so bad.
Oh, my God.
Like, the kids are dead. And so with that, Robbie actually mobilised and went straight to Alice Springs Hospital to figure out what was going on. And then, there was obviously not a lot that he could do. So he's gone back home and he's told Karlie that Hazel was being airlifted down to Adelaide Hospital.
Yeah.
At the Royal Adelaide Hospital. And so Karlie and Daniel got in a car together with Khandalyce and went down to visit Hazel. Now, Robbie says now that he had suspected for a few months that there was something going on between Karlie and Daniel. He'd come home one day for lunch and unannounced, as you are more than entitled to do in your own home, and he'd seen Daniel's car in the driveway and he decided not to go inside. He decided just to go back to work and eat his lunch at work because he said he just didn't want to know.
No.
But he suspected there was something going on between the two of them. So I guess at the time, Karlie basically said, so this was in, late October of 2008. Karlie left him a note, I think, and basically said, don't want to be with you anymore. I'm leaving. Me and Candles. So, yeah, Candles is what they called Khandalyce.
Yeah.
Me and Candles are leaving, and he never saw her again. Oh, look, he heard from her. But he never saw her again. Did he?
Yeah, did he? Yeah.
Just really quickly, Daniel James Holdom, he had a very troubled past.
Yeah.
So his mother neglected him, something shocking. She was not maternal whatsoever. His birth father didn't have anything to do with him. His stepfather was an abuser.
So his mother, though, says that the way that he was conceived meant that she couldn't envelop him because she, I don't know, yeah.
Like as in she was raped?
It's kind of inferred that. It's never said, it's never been said anywhere, but it has been inferred within the court documents. Because this is the thing, look, a lot of that information around his childhood, there's not a lot of stuff that's consistent. So
or verifiable.
Yeah, exactly. So
although his mother does, I mean, there's
certainly bits.
There are
but
docs documents, like
Yes.
Department of
Yes.
Children's Services documents.
Yeah, but they don't align them with his story
No.
and then the mother's story. They don't
Yeah.
all line up. And so it's kind of like, who do you believe?
Yeah. I just think it's really sad because at 8 years
Yeah.
of age, they've put him into foster care
Yes.
because they were like, we can't handle this child.
No, well, that was
we don't want him to.
the stepfather was heavily abusing him.
Right.
Yeah.
But then at 9 years of age, he's placed back in the home with the mother. So did she leave the
he didn't.
stepfather in
No,
that
at
time?
9 he was placed with his dad, with his biological father.
Right.
Who was apparently that went quite well for a
yeah.
brief period.
Yeah.
And then he was placed in the care of his grandparents,
His paternal grandparents. Yeah.
That wasn't going so great. And so then
they couldn't handle him.
They couldn't handle him. He started going backwards again.
Yeah.
So then he went into a group home. Oh. Yeah, which I mean look, and there's the documentation from the group home is quite positive. There's a lot of documentation of he's happy and he's making friends and which
How
I
much
know
of
of
that
those
is-
places.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you put into what those documents
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
But because his account of that was that it was fucking awful. But then I wouldn't believe a word that came out of his mouth either.
No, because
So
he fucking lies just to.
I think the
for his
trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma
Yeah.
of like generationally speaking. I mean, fucked up is really all you can say.
own. So fucked up.
Yeah.
So fucked up.
Yeah. But I mean, there's a point where you kind of go, how much of that can you blame on then who he's become? Like, I get it that definitely shapes him for sure. But I don't even think that calling him a piece of shit is enough.
Oh no.
That doesn't cover it.
Agreed. And also, I think we say this so frequently on this show. Just because you've endured abuse doesn't make you an abuser. I understand there's a cycle there.
Yeah.
And it can absolutely inform future behaviour. But we know that there are so many people out there who endure this abuse who then don't go on to perpetrate.
Yeah.
And we'll get into this definitely as well, but he's gone on to do some fucking heinous shit.
Oh God, it's deplorable. Like it's absolutely awful. Because look, he's had opportunities in his life to turn things around at points, but he's also had a whole lot of shit points in his life where he's basically, it's given him no other opportunity but to be a shit person.
Yeah.
Not to this degree, I'm saying. Like I think that's where I kind of go, okay, I can't. Because there was one where I was reading where he would run away because his stepfather was abusing him, like physically, emotionally, everything. Every abuse under the sun his stepfather was doing to him. Apparently the stepfather and his brother, the stepfather's brother, and him would sexually abuse him. So he would then run away. Daniel would run away. The cops would then pick him up and take him back. Now, that's just, that hurts my soul. Like that there weren't people then, stepping in at those points either. So there were certainly points where people did step in, but there were other points where they didn't.
Yeah.
So,
It's just, it's absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
So Karlie's mum, Colleen, was diagnosed with breast cancer, and her dying wish was that she wanted to see Karlie Khandalyce. So all she really knew at this point was that Karlie Khandalyce had gone down to Adelaide with Daniel, who they'd met once, I think, and they didn't like him. They thought he didn't make eye contact with them. He was rude. He was not very nice to Karlie. They loved Robbie.
They were going, Their story was that they were going to look for work.
Yeah. Even though Karlie had a job in Alice Springs.
Yes. Yeah. That was the story, was that when they left, was that they were looking for work.
Yeah. So Colleen's husband, Scott, so Karlie's stepfather, they were doing everything they could to try and reach them. It's horrible because in the preceding years, they hadn't seen Karlie Khandalyce, but they'd heard from them, or so they thought.
Yeah.
They had received phone calls to say that they needed money. They'd received text messages and various other sort of forms of contact like that. I don't think there was any social media contact. I think that was one thing that they hadn't done. Karlie's cousin, so I think this was, so this is one of Colleen's sister's daughters. She'd actually, to try and locate Karlie and Khandalyce, had put out like a missing person, not a missing persons thing, but hey, who's seen Karlie? Last known address was in Adelaide. We're trying to find her because Auntie Colleen's, would like to see her. They tried, the mobile number that they had for her and just no contact. And apparently on her deathbed, Colleen basically hallucinated that Karlie and Khandalyce were in the corner of the room, and
apparently her last words that she spoke that were able to be understood was, "Are Karlie and Candles here yet?" But she had actually reported them missing officially with police on the 4th of September in 2009.
Yeah.
And so the police did make some contacts and try and find Karlie.
This actually gives me the shits.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and look, this has changed since then and they won't accept this now, but unfortunately, and not only this case, but also I think of the Lady Vanishes.
Oh, yeah, the Lady Vanishes. Marion
Dawson.
Marion, what was her name?
Oh, my God. Barlow. But.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God. Something bar something. It'll come to me in a minute. But, so in September 4th, she reported them missing. The police then contacted people and did get in touch with Daniel, because that was the name that the mother had, Colleen had said, she was with Daniel Holdom, and all these sorts of things, and that last known in Adelaide. So the Adelaide police had contacted Daniel, and he said to them, I haven't seen her since February 2009. Mm-hmm. We separated, and she went to Northern Territory, but then last I heard she was in Queensland with a new bloke, right? That was his story. He told them, and then he said, I do have another number for her. Call me back this afternoon and I'll get it for you. Call me back this afternoon and I'll give it to you, this other number. They were unable to contact him for further information from there. However, in the meantime, on September 10th, 2009, Karlie's mother received a number of messages from Karlie, text messages saying that she was fine, Candles was fine, we're all okay, but we don't want to have contact. We don't want contact with family, but we're fine.
Can you please send me some money?
Can you send me money? So which then Colleen's gone and rung the police back and said, oh, it's okay. I've got text messages from her. She's saying she's fine but doesn't want contact with family. So they've said, oh, well, tick box, done, no longer a missing person. Mm-hmm. So in September 2009, she's no longer now a missing person. So that's why when in 2010 a body is found in the Belanglo Forest, there's no missing person report for Karlie or Khandalyce because it's been
withdrawn. So when the police are looking into this, initial missing persons report, they could see that her bank cards had been used, mm-hmm. and that there was activity on her mobile phone, and they kind of just took it at that. Yep. We know for sure, 100% for sure, that Karlie wasn't alive at the time.
So a total of $72,000 mm-hmm. was accessed in her bank account between 2008 and 2011. Mm-hmm. Sorry, 2012.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So this was Centrelink payments or mm-hmm. social support payments.
Yeah.
And it was all withdrawn. So it was either used through her card, so that was used for things like Ubers and hotels, flights. There was some food items on there, or cash was withdrawn from ATMs. Mm-hmm. There was a person identified as a woman in a wheelchair with quite a frumpy appearance, mm-hmm. attending a Centrelink office and then a credit union office to change the address details, that then matched, surprisingly enough, where Hazel was living with Daniel.
Yeah. She claimed to be Karlie and also brought along Khandalyce's birth certificate with mm-hmm. her. And therefore that actual interaction with Centrelink on that particular moment released a payment of $7,806 for arrears of family tax benefit and rent assistance.
Yeah, so she basically said at the time that she did not want to claim child support anymore, and that it then entitled her, mm-hmm. who they thought was Karlie, mm-hmm. to get back payment for those things.
Yeah. So and that money immediately obviously was siphoned out of that account slowly as well. Just awful. So that was in 2010, that particular incident.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we go back to, well, I guess should we say what we now know happened?
Yep,
Yeah?
I think so.
So basically from the point of Karlie and Daniel Holdom leaving Adelaide and leaving his girlfriend of the time, Hazel, in a wheelchair in Adelaide.
After having killed her two children.
Yeah. So they disappeared, the two of them. They ran off, and they ended up in Canberra on the 17th of December. That was a bit earlier than that. We ended up in Canberra visiting. They went and visited with Daniel's cousin, I believe it was.
Yeah,
Christine.
his cousin Christine and her husband Derek.
Yep. So there was the three of them, obviously, that were staying there with them. There was Candles as well as Karlie and Daniel. And on was it the December 15th, I wanted to say.
14th of December 2008.
I'm myself confused. Yep, 14th.
They were the last two people to see Karlie alive. So their account of that night is that Daniel and Karlie had an argument. Mm-hmm. They left Khandalyce with the couple, so with Christine and Derek, with the cousin and her husband, and they took off in Karlie's car. The next day at around, was it about 2 o'clock? So what we do know is that due to the phone data that was then recovered from Daniel's phone, mm-hmm. he was at the Belanglo State Forest for 7.5 hours that following morning. So he has driven from Canberra to the Belanglo State Forest. He was there a bit after midnight, I believe. Oh, it was about about 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, they left Canberra at 2:30 in the morning. So they were there they would have arrived in the Belanglo more like 4:30 sort of stuff. Yep. 4:30.
He was there for 7.5 hours, or his phone was. In this time, he'd actually taken some really horrific photos of Karlie.
Absolutely disgusting.
So in the execution of her murder, not only had he done exactly what the coroner ascertained, in that he stomped on her chest and crushed her internal organs, he sexually assaulted her. There's photographic evidence of this.
Yep.
He used implements like glass bottles. He defaced her with all manner of like scratches and cuts and that kind of thing, and took plenty of photos for his pleasure, I guess. I don't know.
It was for him to look back on afterwards, and gross. Yeah.
Horrible. What a fucking sick prick.
In the court documents, it does talk very explicitly about what is in those photos.
Yeah.
I'm not going to repeat it because it's absolutely beyond horrific.
Oh, it's beyond absolutely comprehension.
Beyond. But not only that, so this same SD card that was in that camera, they found all sorts of photos on that camera that were deleted but still on the card. And a particular photo that was found was also that on the night of the car accident with the children in the car, he had taken a photo of one of the children's skull fragments on the ground near that accident. Mm-hmm. So somehow in that moment of staggering around that horrific accident, he had decided to take a photo of that.
Yeah, and his account of it is, I was rendering first aid to Hazel the whole time.
Oh, he is quite possibly one of the most evil people I've ever come across.
Absolutely pure evil.
So these photos that they were taken of Karlie in these disgusting photos, it is unknown whether or not she was alive or dead at that time. They can't determine that. Disgusting. Absolutely horrendous.
It's horrible. He'd covered her face in a lot of them, which is why it makes it difficult to determine whether she was alive or deceased. But it was very, very close either way.
Yeah.
The last photo was taken about 45 minutes before he left the forest.
Yeah. Yep. He returned then back to Canberra where Khandalyce was, obviously without Karlie.
Yep.
To which his cousin, this Christine, was, well, why would she just leave without candles? And he made this statement of, she just does that sometimes. You know, we have arguments and she just ups and leaves and goes. So that was just...
Karlie's family said that would literally never happen. She would never, ever do that. She would never leave candles.
Yeah.
Ever.
So in all of this, the only two people that would ever comment negatively around Karlie's parenting is Christine, because she believed what her cousin told her, Daniel. So they were the only two that was had statements that said negative things around Karlie's parenting. So just putting that out there.
Yeah.
So basically, Christine took it on face value that, Karlie was still alive, obviously, and off on her own, run off from this argument, and they'll sort that out.
Yeah.
A couple of days later, Holdom actually, he gets rid of the car that he had that was actually Karlie's car. He went and got rid of that.
Traded it in.
He got another car, a Holden Statesman. And on the 19th of December.
Which was in Derek's name.
Yeah, that's right.
So the cousin's husband's name, because Holdom didn't have a license after the accident.
Yes.
It had been taken off him.
But he's still driving around everywhere.
He was still driving around, yeah.
Yeah. So, on the 19th of December, him and Candles pack up their stuff from his cousin Christine's house and hit the road. But Candles is never to be seen alive again.
So I think Daniel said to Christine that he was going to drop Candles at her grandmother's place.
Yeah.
And so Christine reckons she took that on face value because he wasn't going to keep his girlfriend's kid.
Yeah.
Assumed that had been prearranged and didn't ask any further questions.
No. But so he headed towards South Australia. But he stopped off at a supermarket in Wagga Wagga along the way. Mm-hmm. He purchased body wash gel, multi-purpose wipes, garbage bags, and duct tape.
Did you know that however many years later, when they were going to court about this, Woolworths were actually able to pull up this receipt out of their records.
That's impressive, because if I went down there and tried to return something, they'd tell me, have you got your receipt?
Don't even get me started. I had a bit of an issue with Woolworths this morning with my cherries. Wasn't very happy. But anyway, sorry, that's a story for another day. But that blew my mind.
Yeah.
That it was like how many 8 odd years later or 6 years later, they were able to go through their records and match. So they knew exactly what he bought. They knew the exact brand.
CCTV footage of him or anything? Or no?
They didn't.
No.
But they had the receipt.
Wow. How do you pinpoint like the exact? How many stores they have? I mean, I guess you're narrowing down to a store, but then you're narrowing
which store. Roughly, they were looking within this time frame.
Yeah,
and then they were able to.
Well, yeah, I guess then the next point would be that they checked into a hotel at 11 a.m. Yeah. So I guess looking at timeline, you could probably say within this hour. Yeah. Look at all the receipts. Yeah, amazing. So they checked into a hotel in Narrandera, in a motel at 11 a.m. But from his phone, like the phone data, they can tell he was only there for about 2.5 hours. However, this is where they believe that unfortunately he killed Khandalyce.
Yeah. So when he checked into the hotel, he checked in under his real name.
Yeah.
Records were kept. Mm-hmm. So the records of this were incredible, the way this came about. But he checked in under his own name, and he checked in that there was one adult and one child checking into the room. The people who, when the police were investigating this many years later, the people who owned the motel at the time were no longer owners.
Right.
So the people who owned it once the police were looking into this were like, well, sorry, we actually don't have, we've only got records for X amount of years. We don't have all those. Yeah. So they were able to find where the old owner was living. They went to visit her there.
Yeah.
And they were like, do you have any records? She was like, look, I really don't think I do. And they were like, well, the other thing we're actually looking for is this particular brand of towel that they found with the body.
With the body, yeah.
And the owner was like, I actually use our old motel towels as my dog towels now. Let me go and see. Yeah. And they were able to match the serial number on the towel from this random woman's house in, I think she was living in country South Australia at the time.
Right.
And they were able to match the serial numbers, like incredible police work to show that that placed him in that place at that time.
And that matches up with Khandalyce.
A couple of weeks later, apparently, this old motel owner got the better of her. She's like, I'm going to go and check and see everything that we brought back from the motel and see if I can find it. She found the actual receipt. He'd paid $85 for the night.
Oh, wow.
And it was in his real name, and it was room 32. And
wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been great to know then what room, because, they could have checked, I guess.
They did.
But, I don't know how much evidence there would be.
They did luminol testing. They tested They tested the bed, which apparently the beds hadn't been changed in that time, but the carpets had and the rooms had been painted, so it didn't come up with anything. And they decided it was way too much work to forensically test every single bed sheet in the whole place, because the chance they would have found something was very minimal. Because how many times would they have been washed? Thousands in that time. So they decided that was not worth the resource for an absolutely 1 in a trillion chance, probably. So incredible police work.
Oh God. Yeah. So so we still don't. I mean, we won't ever know, I don't think, exactly what happened to Khandalyce, because he is the only person that knows. But the one thing that we do know, and that is agreed upon from the prosecution's point of view, as well as his defence, that there was a sexual motive involved in the murder of Khandalyce, which, again, fucking disgusting piece of shit.
Hazel was interviewed in the course of all of this because they wanted to know what involvement she had, and because after Karlie was murdered, Daniel and Hazel re-entered into their relationship. She just took him back.
He literally,
why.
So basically he murdered Khandalyce, put her in that suitcase and dropped her off on the side of the road in then South Australia.
Yeah.
On his way, because the next spot he stopped at was literally Hazel's house.
Yep.
Knocked on the door and they started their relationship again.
Yep. She just took him back in. He had some kind of weird hold over her.
Well, let's get into that maybe as we go down the track.
Yeah. Hazel, when she was interviewed by the police after all of this came to a head, they basically offered her an inducement, which is different. It's different from like an indemnity.
Right.
So basically what it means is if she provided a true and accurate statement, she could not be prosecuted for any information she gave. However, if she perjured herself in the statement, they could prosecute her for that. And so if they were able to gain evidence for that, then the police could choose to then prosecute her for her lies. So it's not an absolute, it's not an absolute immunity.
Yeah.
It's called an inducement. And apparently this is a tactic that police use all the time, because they get the information that they want and then they can still
prosecute
the person, because
if they don't do the right thing.
They're all crims.
But I'm sorry, but she is equally a piece of shit as he is. Like in
Hard
that,
agree.
probably not to his level, but still.
No, not quite
The
as
simple
bad.
fact of the matter is this guy's rocked back up. He tells her eventually, because she finds Karlie's possessions in the car, the boot of his car. And she's like, oh my God, they're still together. Like, and he's going, no. She's like, she ran off to Queensland, that old story. Eventually he breaks down and he tells her that he's murdered Karlie and Khandalyce.
He says she's gone for good. And then Hazel doesn't ask any further questions to that. But
eventually he
confesses fully.
Doing both to what he did to both of them with some detail.
Well, he says to her, this is Hazel's statement.
Yeah.
He says he raped her with a bottle. He stomped on her throat and crushed her throat.
Yeah. And do you know his response to when she said, why did you do that? His response was, I did it for you because I wanted to come back to you. Mm-hmm. And she turned around and went, oh, the love of my life. What the fuck? Why would you not like heading down to the police station to go, holy fuck? This guy who now has murdered my 2 children in a car accident has now murdered another girl and her child. Get the fuck out, love. She didn't. They stayed together until 2010.
Yep.
And even then, they split up. And in 2010, we still didn't know that Khandalyce had still not been found in that suitcase.
No.
So in 2010, she splits up with him and it's all really bad and he's an asshole. She still didn't even go, I'm going to the cops on you?
No.
Can't even. Oh, God. I mean, and then not to mention all the phone calls she made on, to him telling her, like, I need you to now phone this person or text that person or rock up at a Centrelink and, make sure that Karlie looks like she's still alive. Disgusting.
It's fucking horrible.
Yeah. She should be in jail.
He admitted to Hazel. This is the bit that gets me. This is the bit that I'm like, why the fuck, when you heard this, were you not down at the police station knowing that you've got a young daughter and now she also had
Well,
no,
she knew,
not yet.
But she knew all this stuff before
Yes, sorry. But she had a young daughter. She still had Lauren at this point.
Uh-huh.
He admitted to her that he was sexually abusing Khandalyce.
Mm-hmm.
And Khandalyce died while they were doing it.
I think I just vomited in my mouth. That's disgusting. That is beyond revolting.
This is the bit that I can't get over. Like, as a mother.
But, I mean, she knew that of him way before that. Like, that statement is next level evil. But she knew that he was capable of that.
Yes, because he'd been...
He used to ask her to detailedly tell him the story of her own abuse, sexual abuse as a child, so that he could jack off to it.
Yep. And he asked her to even write it down in stories. And so she used to write him stories about it.
Of it.
Yep. Oh, it's just horrific.
So by the time we get to, like, where we've now identified Khandalyce's body and we've identified Karlie's body and all these sorts of things, they very quickly catch on to Daniel being
a person of
prime
interest.
suspect, right?
Yep.
And they can find him very easily because he's already in jail. So he was in waiting sentencing for a sexual assault case of a child under the age of 10 at a caravan park in New South Wales, Central Coast.
So this poor little girl, she was 9 years of age, and you can... I don't even know that we want to go down her account of what happened. But she actually, to her, you know, what a strong little girl, she told her mum and dad straight away about what had happened. So at the time, Daniel was... So he and Hazel had broken up at this point, and he had actually entered into a relationship with a 17-year-old girl.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I can't even with this.
I mean, at this point, he's, put over 40.
Yeah.
Because, like, what is he? He's 44 by the time, in 2018 when he gets sentenced.
Yeah, I think he was like 42 or something when all this happened.
Gross.
In fact, I've got that written down somewhere. No, he was 43. He was 43.
Oh.
So what an absolute fucking asshole going out with a 17-year-old. Like, fuck off, you absolute pedo.
But where are people stepping in with this? I don't know. Yeah. But he was also found with a notebook, right?
Oh, yes.
Where there were 30 children's names in this book, it was either their name or an age that was sort of identified them. And next to each of them, it was written either rape, forced, or consent.
What does rape... This is what I didn't get when I was reading this. What's the difference between rape and forced?
Oh, don't get me started on that. Like, what the fuck? And then consent.
Consent, if you're under the age of, 16, you cannot provide consent.
And these ages were all well under that.
Absolutely. And also, if he was in his fucking 30s and 40s when he was doing this shit.
Yep. Yeah, so Candle's name was on that list. Mm-hmm. They can't verify that what was written in that book was accurate, but the things that were in there,
because he only had given names,
so
the police, as much as they tried, they couldn't actually narrow down who these girls were.
No, but what they could work out was that there was definitely locations in the book where they could prove he was in that time frame of 2006 to 2007. There was also the stuff that was in there that he claims that he had done were very much in line with what the photos of, like, Karlie's body and things showed. So you could deduce that these were quite possibly accurate, but are not enough evidence, obviously, to declare outright that this wasn't false. Because, as you were talking about before, he was also into stories. So we don't know what level of it was fantasies, and so it's possible that some of this was just fantasies.
And I think you were alluding to this before as well. He just lied all the time.
Well,
he lied for things that would potentially get him into more trouble that weren't true, and then he lied about things to get himself out of he was a fucked unit. He's a fucked unit.
He was interviewed when they arrested him originally for this, which at that point he said he had no part in it, to the point of when they arrested him for it, he said, "You've got the wrong guy." He ended up pleading guilty.
Yeah, he did plead guilty eventually.
Yeah.
But he actually implicated Derek, that his cousin's husband.
kidding?
No, that was the first thing. He was interviewed by police, and the police were like, well, we put it to you that blah, 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 that you've done all these things.
Yeah.
And he was like, no. Then the police said, look, this was a multiple hour interview.
Yeah.
They then gave him, he was in prison awaiting sentencing at the time. They gave him their card and they're like, if you can think of anything else, let us know. And he'd gone overnight, obviously had to think about how he was going to sort of spin this to make it work for him. And he was like, the next morning, he's like, look, I didn't want to say anything yesterday, but it was Derek. It's actually Derek.
Oh.
Yeah, he's a piece of shit, that Derek. I mean, Derek has bit turns before, to be fair.
Right.
But not in the murder of Karlie or Khandalyce.
One thing to say oh no, I didn't do it, and try and get yourself out of it. It's a whole other level of things to put someone else in it.
And someone you know.
Point at someone and go, yeah, they did it.
A family member.
That's really shit. That is really, disconnected from any kind of...
He actually said to them as well, he's like, I'll be a Crown witness and I'll never speak to my family again. You've got to give me a new identity though, a new name, and that needs to be paid for by the Crown.
Yeah, you're going to pay for me to be
a new person, and I'll disappear. And they were all like, I mean, the police knew at this point that he'd done it. And they were like, yeah, sure. Tell us a bit more about that. And in the telling of this story that he'd conjured up, he actually couldn't keep the story straight. And he told 3 different versions of events. Yeah. And when they then challenged him with that, he was like, I need a lawyer.
Oh, good one, mate.
Yeah, it's about time.
Yeah.
He ended up getting a legal aid lawyer who he didn't like. And then he asked for the government to pay for a proper criminal attorney, which they did, I think, eventually. The justice in the case was not happy about any of it, but obviously wanted a fair trial because he didn't want anything coming,
well, this is the other thing
here.
Psychologically, he dragged this out as long as he possibly could once there was on the cards a trial.
Yeah.
So at first it was, he was innocent. By the time he'd got legal counsel, he was, probably going to plead guilty. That was the on advice of them. So he got all the way up to the day of the hearing, to which he then decided he told his counsel as they arrived, because obviously he's coming in from the docks, from the jail underneath, comes into it with his counsel and goes, I'm not going to plead guilty to Khandalyce's murder. So then they were in this position of having to present that to the judge on the spot, which didn't go down too well. It got sorted out eventually, and he did plead guilty to both of them. But I mean, he just wanted to find any way possible to drag this out and make it take longer than it needed to. Did you know that Mark Tedeschi, the prosecution, who is the same prosecutor for Karlie Lane? Now, I'm not a big fan. But,
not at all. But he actually did a really good job in this case.
On this one.
Go back and listen to our Kelly and Tegan Lane episode, and you can get our real thoughts on Mark Tedeschi, especially in that situation.
And we're not the only ones.
Oh, no, we're not.
There's a lot about him. I mean, he actually resigned as senior prosecutor in the February of that year, the 2018. So I'm not sure that he was there actually for the final sentencing and stuff of Daniel. But, he was certainly part of the original hearings and things, because that was back in August of 2017 when it first started being heard. You can find the court documents online. There's the statement by the judge when he sentences Daniel is quite lengthy, but worth a read.
Incredibly lengthy.
He hit the nail on the head. He's a massive evil motherfucker. He is disgusting.
He received 2 life sentences on the 29th of November in 2018, and he will rot in jail, thank fuck, because there's no rehabilitation for a piece of shit like that.
I imagine him in jail, and just,
I think he has to be in a solitary wing because he's a child rapist and child murderer. And
I don't know why we protect them.
I don't know why either. Fucking let him at him.
Oh,
he deserves it.
Oh, he's just... it's really gross what he did to those 2 people, and I can't even imagine the number of other people have been impacted by him and his behaviours.
We wouldn't even know.
No, I think that he is where he belongs, absolutely, in prison, and that's what... I mean, I know Karlie's stepdad actually asked for the death penalty to be invoked again for him. I think that's too good for him personally. I think he can rot it out in jail for as long as possible.
Yep.
As we said, Colleen, Karlie's mum unfortunately passed away in 2012, so she didn't know where they were.
Well, she didn't know that they were deceased.
No, had no idea of any of that.
Mean, maybe that's a small mercy because she didn't have to have the pain of knowing this, because this is the thing, the long-term effects of this on Karlie Khandalyce's family, it's untold.
Absolutely. So her stepbrother, or half-brother, and her stepdad still live in Alice Springs and, are living their lives. But it's huge, the impact this has had. Absolutely.
Oh, it's forever for them. This is forever. Their lives are forever changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Karlie and Khandalyce were actually buried in the same coffin. An extra wide coffin was made so that they could be together forever. And they were buried next to Karlie's mum and Khandalyce's grandma in Alice Springs.
Yeah, I hope they're together somewhere.
I'm sure they are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's a big one.
It was.
There's actually so much more to this case that we haven't even touched on. I listened to a really great audiobook called The Lost Girls by Ava Benny Morrison about this. You can purchase the book through Amazon, but I just listened to it through Audible. If you want to really deep dive into this case, have a listen or pick up the book and have a read, because it's so detailed. It'll get you. Yeah. And just be prepared for that, because there's a lot of detail in the book that, it's absolutely horrific. And I think similarly can be said of the court transcripts if you get your hands on those.
Yeah.
It took me a bit to find them actually, but once I did and had a read through, it's a lot.
It's a lot, definitely a lot. Yeah.
Next week's episode's a little lighter.
Glad you write this stuff down, because I always forget.
Yeah. We're actually doing Carol Baskin, the Tiger King.
Oh, that's actually, you know what? I just literally breathed. It's just, that'll be it's still murder, but it's a lot lighter.
A lot lighter.
Yeah.
And we can reminisce about our lives in 2020.
Oh, we're going to talk about stuff that episode actually before we get into it, about somewhere I've been that we could go in these holidays.
Oh, cool.
That is very reminiscent of Tiger King.
Oh, let's do it. Cool. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for another episode of Two Crime Besties. As always, please, like, comment, subscribe, all of the things that the kids say these days. We really appreciate it. And if you'd like to buy us a coffee, you can do so at buymeacoffee.com/Two Crime Besties.
For sure. Check you on the socials. Stay curious, Crime Besties.
Bye.